Okay, so for your Declaration of Independence DBQ, we're doing the graphic organizer that is your pre-writing for your essay today. So you'll go to your assignment called Declaration of Independence DBQ Essay on Google Classroom. Open that up. I have my example open right here. If you want to complete the graphic organizer on paper, that's fine. Do it on paper. But this is the place where you will eventually write your essay, because we have the graphic organizer, and then down below that, this is where you'll write your essay, and below that, you have the editing checklist. So everything you need for your DBQ essay is here, and this is where I'll expect to find your DBQ essay typed next week when it is done. So, our 5-paragraph essay, you have a description of what each paragraph is here. Today we're going to focus on paragraph 2, explaining the ideal that you think is most important. So this one's going to be explaining as much as persuading. The other parts are very much more about persuading. So the first thing is you have to choose which of the 4 ideals do you want to say is most important. Make sure you have one that you care about that you can explain. Today I am going to model by saying the consent of the governed is most important. Oops, sorry. My computer's a little unstable here. I'm trying to hold it at a good angle, and it's not working very well. So, I'm going to go with consent of the governed, so I'm going to go ahead and highlight that. If you're working on paper, just circle the one you're doing. If you're working on digitally, please highlight it. That way you can go back and see. And then here, I'm going to go down to my claim in the purple box. If you're on paper, just find the one that says claim. I always make the claims purple for those of you who are doing it digitally. So let's see. I'm just going to say consent of the governed is most important because, and then write down whatever your thoughts are. Okay. Whatever you're thinking, write it down. I'm going to stop there for right now. I could tell you a whole lot more, but we're going to come back and finish this claim statement later. Whatever you're thinking right now, go ahead and add it there. What's important about equality? What's important about unalienable rights? What is important about consent of the governed? Write down your thought there. Because what your thought may well be your claim. It might be something that we use for a topic sentence instead, but it might be your claim. So, I'm going to go on and I'm going to start looking at my body paragraphs here. So, explain the most important ideal using the documents. So the topic sentence I'm going to say is going to be explaining a little bit what the consent of the governed is. It is not going to be from the documents yet. This is, okay, so what do people need to know about this? If you're explaining this to a younger sibling or to maybe your grandparent, they might not remember what consent of the governed means, or they might have a different understanding of equality than you. So just explain it. At its most basic, what is it? So the consent of the governed, means that, I have to think here. It means that what? So I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to finish that thought, and you pause and finish your thought. All right, so I finished my thought, and you can see I made a spelling mistake. Don't worry too much about those. If you're having a hard time spelling, remember you can also tap on the speak icon down next to the space bar on your iPad and tell your iPad what you're thinking. If spelling gets in your way, which I know it does for some people, if spelling gets in your way, just speak it and then make sure you reread it and check it and make sure it says what you wanted it to say. It's not always faster. If you can spell well, it's usually faster to type it yourself. So, next we're going to be looking for evidence. And this is evidence. It says cite evidence from the DBQ packet and explain your reasoning. So I'm going over here to find my DBQ packet. Yours is under Google Classroom. So, let's say I'm doing consent of the governed, so I'm going to go to document C. And hopefully you have your documents marked up. You've highlighted some important parts. I am looking for a quote that explains what the consent of the governed is. So I'm going to maybe choose to use this quote from the DBQ, or maybe I'll choose to use something from the source down here. Let's see. I think maybe I'd use this sentence right here. Since I am doing this digitally, I can use Control C. If you're on the iPad, you'll tap and get to the paste, but on the computer, I will use Control C. And let me get back to my example. Then I am just going to, let's see, this is the quote from the packet. I'm just going to paste that there. I don't need an extra bullet point there. I'll take that out. But there we go. I'm going to put my ending quotation marks. Now I need my source. So I'm going to look back at my packet. My source was Democracy Web, and it does not have a date on it. Well, we'll have to deal with that. We should have the author's name and the date, but since I don't have a date, I am just going to put ending parentheses. For right now, later on, I will look it up and see if I can figure out, 2012 is when this DBQ was written, so I'm going to assume that 2012 was the date. I don't like it making that assumption, but that's the best we can do for a date right now. So I would use Democracy Web, 2012. Now, I'm not done there. I got it copied and pasted. I still need to introduce it. So let's see, I'm going from the consent of the government means that the government has to listen to people and do what the people want. So I might say, according to the website Democracy Web. No, I don't need that first comment there. According to the website Democracy Web, consent of the governed means that people vote to decide on what the government is or does. Okay? Because they say in a vote or through elected representatives. So that is my introduction. Introducing this. Then I have the quote. I'm going to cite it. And now I need my reasoning. This is the most important part. Reasoning is my thoughts explaining how this quote supports my claim that consent of the governed is most important. So here's where I need to say it is extremely important. I love it when the computer corrects my spelling. So it's extremely important that the people get to vote to control the government because, and now I'm going to go on giving my other thoughts there. If you're doing consent of the governed with me, you're on your own. You're going to have to actually come up with those thoughts on your own. I will finish it, but much, much later when I'm ready to give you an example of an essay. I'm going to do the same thing with another detail from the documents down here and giving more reasoning. So I'd go back to my documents, find something else that I'm going to quote. I might want to talk about Tiananmen Square, since this document's mostly about Tiananmen Square. I might say how in Tiananmen Square, protesters, people were protesting to tell the government what they wanted, but the I just lost my train of thought. Sorry. So the protesters were telling the government what they wanted, but the government decided not to listen. So I'm going to make sure to put that in here. So I'm going to talk about how Tiananmen Square is, and I'm sure I misspelled that, but I'll go back and check it later. Tiananmen Square is an example of the government not listening to people. So this was not consent of the governed. And then I need to go on and explain why it's important. You know, what's wrong with what happened in Tiananmen Square? Why shouldn't the government just shoot 3,000 people every time there's protesters that they don't agree with? Why not? Hopefully that's pretty easy to explain. Most of us could give a really good reason for that, I think. But I would need a quote from the document, or I can put it in my own words, what happened in Tiananmen Square. Right? This is still from the document. And I might use that word, that quote from the banner, "All power belongs to the people," or something like that, but otherwise explain what happened at Tiananmen Square somewhere in here. Okay. The last thing is the concluding sentence. This is just summarizing what's the main thought I have about why consent of the government is consent of the governed is very important. I'm going to wrap it up with just that. What's the main thought people need to remember? It's going to be something I've already said up here. I just need to restate it in one sentence. If you can get all of that box done today in class, then you're awesome and ready to go on. Feel free to do more. But if you can get that one box done today, that's what really needs to happen. All right. Good luck. Email me if you have questions.